Hello there, I'm Shawn, and today I'm going to be talking about food videography. Now, I've shot a few scenes to do with food over the course of this last year, due to lockdown and all that. Being stuck in the house meant that I had to think on my feet when it came to testing out all the new cameras and lenses that we've had come to the market over the last year. So obviously filming something like food is something that, because I've got a kitchen and a fridge and an oven and chopping boards and knives and all that, it was kind of just like an easy thing to obtain for testing all this new kit. So now that I've made a few videos around filming with food, I thought this would be a good opportunity to share with you guys what I do, my practices, what lighting I bear in mind for the whole setup, what lenses I use, but also just like some tips and techniques that I bear in mind when it comes to what shots I want, and then what I'm bearing in mind for my edit when it comes to actually putting the video together. So firstly, you're obviously going to want a camera. More often than not, I'm videoing on the Lumix GH5. That is my personal camera that I use for most of my shooting. But through a lot of the example footage that I'm going to be showing to you guys throughout the course of this video, I shot on the C70 for filming some bao buns being made, which were delicious, by the way. And I also shot on the Lumix S5, the Lumix S1H, which are all amazing cameras for this kind of thing, because they're all very workable for handheld scenarios, which is how I like to shoot, because I feel like it frees me up nicely for getting all the angles that I like without having to do too much of a setup. As for frame rates, I often shoot at 50p at the appropriate shutter speed and everything, because I feel that when you're shooting with food, I often don't plan what it is that I necessarily want the edit to look like, so I just go for 50p. Because then I've got the 50 frames per second thing going on. And then if I want to just add in a little bit of slow motion, I know it's only a ×2 slow motion, but it just gives it a little bit more. Sometimes if you've got like a static shot of a product and you're just kind of doing a sliding shot, if you're going handheld and you're a little bit wobbly, having that 2x slow motion does help to stabilize your shot a little bit. I know we've got things like warp stabilizer, but I often just use that as a last resort, because generally I think the 50 FPS works a treat anyway. But then the other thing to bear in mind, I guess, is what lenses you're using. You don't want to use just standard kit lenses most of the time. Kit lenses these days are getting increasingly better as new cameras come out, and the expectations of videographers is much higher than what it used to be. So you're getting more kit lenses with lower f numbers now, because that's something that you kind of need with food. You need a wide open aperture so you can get not only just a shallow depth of field, but just to let all that light in and let all of that color from all the varieties of food you're going to be filming shine on screen. But to do with the lenses that I was using for some of the example footage, again, that you're going to be seeing in this video, is I was using some of the Canon EF and RF lenses for the C70. I was also using the Sigma Art lenses when it came to working with the ProRes RAW footage to do with the S5 and the S1H. And also for a time I had the Siri anamorphic lenses, which worked very well for creating a very kind of like a different look, a more Hollywood style of look for my food video kind of thing. We're making a curry. It was very good. It was my birthday actually, so that was my birthday curry. A lot spicier than what I was expecting it to be. So once you've got your camera and your lenses all paired together and you've got a nice image coming through, now you want to make sure you've got a nice image to bring through. And that brings us over to lighting. Now, I often just do a 2-point lighting sort of setup. I often leave the house lights on just to give like a fill to the whole atmosphere so everything looks awake and alive. But also it just helps me out because I'm working from home and I haven't got all the best lights that at my disposal to make up what exactly I would like to make. But I do have the Nanlite PaverTube 6Cs, and I do have a LED panel light that I can use. So what I generally do is I'll use the PaverTubes to key light things. It's more of like a soft fill, which I think works quite nicely. And then I'll use my bigger panel light as the backlight. Because what backlighting does for me is that it really separates out your subject from the background, much like how having a shallow depth of field really focuses in on the subject that you want to bring people's attention to. And then key lighting is there just to make those colors come through nicely. Because that's something we like to see in food videos, is not just the kind of the food pornography style of thing, but we also just want to see the variety of colors that food can be made with. Say it's more of like a bready dish, you will typically probably want to use more soft lighting to make it look fluffier, or hard lighting if you want, if it's more of like a crispy dish, because you want to see like the hard edges of that crispiness, so that it, you know, people can almost like see what kind of texture that dish is going to, you know, taste like when someone comes to bite into it. But generally speaking, you want your food to appear how it would appear in real life, because that is obviously like, if food looks unnatural, it doesn't necessarily look as edible. You can use like fire from a barbecue as like almost like a practical light source. That looks really good on like if you're like doing a meat video or something, so you're cooking some steaks. Having some flame grill fire is often an aesthetic that a lot of people can get behind. Now I think with any form of filmmaking, really, depending on what you're doing, of course, when you're making a video, you want to incorporate as much movement as possible, and that's when you can incorporate you know, a really nice pan head on your tripod, getting lots of nice pan and tilt shots. So what I generally do is I go handheld, or I use like a slider of some kind. If you've got like a 1.5 meter rail, that gives you a lot of space to like move around. Something that's really good for that sort of setup as well is to make sure you've got a good foreground to what it is that you're focusing on, because when you're focusing over there, what is here is going to be out of focus. And that looks quite nice, because it's really nice to get that depth of like moving almost like through a city of ingredients, but you're focusing over on the horizon of where the action is actually taking place. That is the kind of motion that I like to see. But also, of course, we want to get those nice panning tilt shots with your tripod really high up in the air. Maybe like we want to see like an overview of what ingredients are laid out on the table, just to set the scene. It's good to open a video with that as like an establishing shot, maybe, if that's the kind of thing you're going for, just to give your audience an idea of what they can expect in this video. The other thing that's quite good about filming recipe videos as well is that it's really easy to shoot it chronologically, because obviously like while you're videoing the whole process, the process is taking place step by step. So you can capture it all in order. And what that means is that when you bring it back to the edit, is that it becomes so easy to just see where everything goes, bringing all that together, and then just kind of having fun with the edit from that point. And that brings me over to like the team working aspect of filming a food video, is that obviously if you're operating the camera and you're coordinating the lights and all that, then you generally don't want to be the chef at the same time as doing all this, because what that does, it really limits what you can do. Because that is when you really are like relying on either static tripods to capture your shot, or if you've got an electronic slider, you can like activate it with your phone and make that do like a tracking shot as you then do certain actions. But that's a lot to think about. I mean, the thing with making videos is that it's a very collaborative effort. So if you're shooting a food video, it's probably a good idea to work with somebody who does the cooking for you, does all the chopping for you, because not only does that then take the stress of the actual like making the food off of your mind, because you know there's the chance things could overcook, you could burn, maybe you don't put as much effort into that as you would have done if you were just focusing on that one thing. But it also means that you can just go handheld and you can travel with your camera, you can really experiment and have fun with the filming process, and also with your chef as well, or your cook, however you want to call them. You can communicate with them verbally, let them know what you're going to do, ask them what they're next going to do, and then you're away and you're making like a much better video just for having that teamwork, and you're not limited by having to do 2 jobs at once. When it comes to working with like cooking on a stove, like over the hobs and everything, where there's fire, which equals danger, so you know, health and safety. When we were doing the C70 video, because we were steaming these buns in like a little steam basket and everything, I wanted that shot where you lift the lid off of that basket and all the steam escapes, and then it unveils the finished buns that are now prepared and ready to be filled with all the other ingredients that were going to go in them. Because of the steam and everything, you don't want to be fogging up your lens unless you want it for some sort of practical effect. It didn't work for me anyway. So what I did was I just filmed at a slight angle, We actually did 2 takes of this because the first time I actually did fog up the lens and I actually didn't see the buns in the basket because the steam had obviously. So we just put the lid back on for like 30 seconds, let the steam accumulate again. You've got to be careful with this because you get kind of a small window before you start burning things, because that's the other thing with cooking, and that's why it's so good to have a team, having someone who cooks and then you film, because then you can just race alongside them to get the shots that you need for your edit, and they can ensure that everything is looking good and everything is cooked properly and not overcooked or undercooked, so that the end result of the video looks aesthetically pleasing and edible, which I think is one of the most important things you want to see on screen when you're looking at food in general. So once you've like told your story and you've got the kind of the narrative of where all the ingredients came from, how it all came to be, once it all culminates together, the next step is to get your hero shot. And this is probably the most important shot in the entire video really, because it's all right having all these bits and pieces which look half decent, because we all know what an onion looks like, we all know what a carrot looks like, and we all know what they sort of look like when they're chopped up as well. But when they're all put together and formulated into this dish, obviously with lighting you want to just like have a look at what the product is. If it's a shiny product, maybe you want to see it shiny because that's what is pleasing about it. I mean, it's all down to taste really, in both a literal and non-literal sense, but it is something that you might want to experiment with a little bit more, because your hero shot's the most important shot in the entire video. This is what's going to sell your dish to your audience. If that doesn't look good, then it's kind of just like a well, what's that? And that's not what you want. You want them to eat that, if they could, which they can't because it's a video. So yeah, just bear in mind your lighting, maybe get a nice 50mm lens on there. 50mm is kind of my go-to for that sort of thing, because it's telephoto enough to give you that kind of punched in look, but it's also wide enough that you can kind of work it as like being able to see more of what's going on in the scene. So what I would advise is just taking your time to take multiple angles of the final dish, just so you can get a nice variety of hero shots to choose from, because you'll find that maybe having multiple angles would work quite well for like just breaking up the moments of it. Maybe you want to show your audience different aspects of the dish, so maybe incorporating a macro lens of some kind so you can get really up close. But anyway, I hope this sharing of what I found with videoing food is useful to you guys. If you've got any questions, you can of course like leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you with any information that I have to share on this topic or any other topic, if you want to bring up any questions at all. There is a list of the kit I use in the description, so if you want to see what kind of stuff I work with, you can look it up, like the lights I use, but also like what microphones I use and everything, and what cameras and lenses I use as well. And if you haven't done so already, then please consider following, subscribing, whichever platform it is that you're watching this video on, because we make content like this and a lot of product overviews of all the new goodies that are coming out on a constant basis, it seems at the moment, all the time. So be sure to follow us, subscribe to us, whichever is you know, relevant to the platform that you're on, so you can stay up to date with the kind of stuff that we're bringing out. And I just want to say a big thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.